I guess we'll get started. Some people will be, joining us, but thanks for coming to bringing mental health data to doctors. My name is Bill Lynch. I'm a data scientist at NeuroFlow, where I work within the product team mostly, but I touch all aspects of the business, coming from a startup kind of world. And hopefully, today I'm going to share some of the learnings in building data products for doctors and mental health, professionals that will hopefully help you be more successful, in your functions. So a little bit of background real quick on where I work. NeuroFlow is a digital health platform that basically allows behavioral health specialists to assess, monitor, and track patient mental health. So they have an app with tools like journaling and guided content that kind of helps them on their journey towards mental well-being. And for organizations specifically, our platform helps, pain management practices integrate behavioral health into their care settings and helps them engage more proactively, around patient mental health. Unlike, I guess, EHRs and traditional paper-based solutions, which tend to silo mental and physical health. So we're trying to, bridge that gap. What we're going to cover, what we're going to go over, we're going to talk about, how we at NeuroFlow think about data when it comes to the mental health side of healthcare, how to make sure it's impactful and actionable, how we determine what to work on, at NeuroFlow, and also how I get the organization to think about data when making decisions, and kind of how I empower the others that I work with to think about and have a discussion about their data. All right, so to kick it off, give a little background on the context around, the gravity of the situation we're dealing with every day. 1 in 5 adults in the United States have a behavioral health disorder each year, and suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. So clearly, there's a need to proactively monitor for mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, but the challenges to doing so effectively are plentiful, so to speak. 67%, for instance, of people with a behavioral health disorder, they don't get appropriate treatment. So there's this huge stigma around mental health. They tend to feel that there's some sort of shame in going to a therapist, whereas, we all go to a gym to kind of whip our bodies into shape. You should be able to go to a therapist to whip your mind into shape. So that's kind of the first problem. We're trying to reduce the stigma around seeing a mental health professional. And then 2, those that do see mental health professionals, the way they deliver it currently is infrequent paper-based measurements and solutions. So it's not only hard to get people to go to therapy, it's hard to make people stay in therapy, and then also bring back anything that's remotely meaningful on their progress, because you're giving them something 30 days prior and telling them to come back with it complete. So it's tough for them to kind of keep tabs on the progress of the patient's mental health. And then finally, the keynote speaker kind of touched on this in the prison population, but medical costs are 2 to 3 times more among those with comorbidities, behavioral health conditions and comorbidities. So if I have a bad back and you guys have a bad back, if I have depression, I'm going to be 2 to 3 times more costly in the long run than you. So there's clearly a need to understand and improve these processes, and we're doing a good job. Finally, there's a lot of research out in the psychology and kind of healthcare domains that are looking at those relationships between depression and anxiety, and what you do in your daily life, how you feel in your daily life, and at the same time, we're also advancing every day in digital technology capabilities. More people have stable internet, more people are adopting smartphones, so it's easier than ever to kind of have a digital solution for remote patient monitoring and an instant delivery of data, trends, resources, all that stuff. All right, so in order to make our users more efficient and improve outcomes, we kind of offer a variety of ways to improve their workflow. So as I mentioned, NeuroFlow is an app where, for patients and providers, we gather all of this patient and provider generated data and essentially allow them their pick of ways to understand their data. You have the format, choice, you have your pick of your reporting and visualizations. And so we ultimately want to build a product for them so they can do less while understanding, their patient populations more and improving their outcomes overall. So for instance, one of the things you can do is track whether or not people are doing things inside of the app. You can track and see if people are actually completing homework that are given to them, if they're completing journals that were assigned, and if not, you can kind of nudge them to do so. You can also see how people are doing longitudinally in terms of their symptom reduction through their questionnaires, or you can understand and see over time how mood is changing, if their pain is reducing, and if they're sleeping better. You can also see and check through funnels, if people are doing things that are associated with successful outcomes. Are they registering? Are they doing a certain number of things in the first month? Are they continuing on this path towards success? And then finally, we also offer a way for them to track their patient population and kind of surface to them the ones that are maybe the riskiest and they should look out for and spend time on the most. So the common thread, though, for all of these things is that one in which I collaborate with product design and other team members is that we have to make it digestible, because you can have like an amazing model or awesome data and projects that you're working on, but if there's not a story around it, no one's going to use it and no one's going to care about it. So you kind of have to make sure that you have a close relationship with all your stakeholders that you're going to work with. So as a team, you guys can collaborate and make sure that your end user is being successful and kind of wins. And one of the most important metrics and ways we deliver data is towards patient outcomes, right? At the end of the day, behavioral health specialists want a quick way to understand how their patients are doing, if they're getting better or worse, and who should they attend to, essentially. And so in order to deliver the patient outcomes in a way that's digestible, we build an algorithm that stratifies their population and allows the provider to efficiently allocate their time and resources on those that need it the most. And so the way we did it, we took in all the data that we have. We have questionnaires on people. We have mobile health data, steps, Apple Health kind of stuff, heart rate, all that. We have momentary data, mood, sleep, pain, and then we have in-app interaction data. And with that, we can kind of use all this historical data to, present a kind of risk score for new examples. And so now what we're doing, we have a product that basically takes clinical policy and turns it into an algorithm, right? We have a way for doctors to not have to go to all this disparate data sources and myriad of data. We kind of bring it all together and give it to them in like a single summary statistics. So so like they don't have to obviously take the time and effort to do it themselves. We provide it in a way that's easily digestible and kind of insightful. That for us means including the ingredients in the analysis to kind of build faith and kind of trust. So like if it's a cake, we're going to tell them we're putting in sugar, butter, and whatnot. We're not telling them the quantities. That's kind of too in depth. It might lose them. But we're allowing them to know, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we're also including language expressing how confident we feel about it. So in a way, we're kind of just consolidating and condensing all this information so that they don't really need to do it themselves and connect the dots themselves. So that's one of the ways. And the next way that I'm pretty excited about what we do, it's around natural language processing and on text data. So for us, we have behavioral health specialists that have their patients write in journals and tell them how they're feeling, right? They kind of give them topics to write about, and then they come in and discuss what the patient has written in the journals and then take action on it. They kind of inform their care and give them next steps. And so again, what we wanted to do is to automate this process, because it takes a lot of time and effort to go through and read all these journals. It takes a lot of effort to analyze all these journals, and they just don't have that. They're very busy. And so we wanted to build an automated way for them to do that. So what we're doing is we're building out an ecosystem of classical and deep learning based natural language processing techniques. So we can, incorporate sentiment analysis and emotional state analysis in order to really identify the degree to which a patient may be suffering. And by detecting that, the intensity of their suicidal ideations or their, self-harm thoughts, we can reduce the time spent for a provider on reading the journals and analyzing the journals, and increasing the efficiency for them, so they can go and proactively outreach their patient and get to them quickly and efficiently. We want to be able to say, there might be something harmful in this, you should take a look at it, essentially. And from a data perspective, again, it's all about bringing in those disparate data sources and using them to provide insight and build a more complete profile of the patient that otherwise would have taken too much time and effort for the providers to do themselves. From our perspective, that's kind of what it's all about. Outcomes and engagement are what the mission of NumFOCUS kind of is. Obviously, how to retain customers and the traditional KPIs are important to the bottom line. I work with sales, customer success, the C-level execs, but our mission is to help others feel better, and whether that's through the provider or patient themselves, it doesn't matter. We just need to be able to deliver that in a digestible way, so our patients can get better and they can see improved outcomes. But how do we know where to start a data-driven project? It's kind of obvious, but you got to start with a question, and that can come in a variety of ways. You might have, your CEO ask, my CEO would ask, how can we help make doctors' lives easier? Or my head of product might ask, how can users get a personalized experience? How can we make it stickier? Is there something that, a North Star kind of metric where they do X number of things and they see improved results? How can we or they stay? How can we get that? How can we get that down? And it's also kind of at this stage a place where you get to kind of tell them what they can do. A lot of times it's not fully formed, or it's a great idea, but we're not ready to do that yet. So this is the step where you can say, this is a great idea, but we're not there. And it's also a place to understand what their pain points are, what they need help with. And also you got to leverage user stories and workflows too. It's super important to understand your users, whether that's internal or external. Understand their pain points, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, what they want to do but can't do. So you have a real opportunity to provide value to your internal users, to get them to come back and to get them to towards their journey towards mental improved mental health. But you can also help your internal stakeholders by understanding how they think about things, what really matters to them. You can kind of help guide them and reach their goals, because that's the goal in a way of like what I do. I got to figure out how I, an analytics person, can help you be more successful and reach your goals, whether that's through the patient or internally my stakeholders. For customer success, it might be, around retention or customer satisfaction, maybe NPS. For product, that might be around engagement and stickiness. And then for C-level company goals or even patients, it's helping them out, helping those patients see symptom reduction while using NeuroFlow. And while you're asking them doing the first two things, you're going to want to ask all of the questions, essentially, and set clear goals, because a lot of times, in my experience, stakeholders might say one thing, but they mean another. So it's just a waste of time for you and them if you do something that's not fully fleshed out and you bring it back and they're like, oh, this is great. but I want you to do it a completely different way. So it's not really helpful for any party involved. And the sooner you can really get to the why, the more successful you'll be in starting, a project that matters and will be successful. And then after you set those clear goals, you gotta set obviously clear expectations on end result and timeline, especially in a data-driven project, which is different than an engineering project. Whether it's healthcare or outside healthcare, it doesn't matter. We as data people, we have tough, kind of poorly defined problems that aren't easy to partition in terms of like tasks like engineering. They have these nice time box, like clearly defined problems, and we don't have that luxury. And so you need to explain that, and you need to set expectations based on that, and then scope out your timeline. For instance, there are a bunch of considerations, whether it's complexity of the data, whether it is if we're building it for product, how it's going to integrate, and then how long it might take to gather and get that information and store that information. It could take a while. It's very open-ended. But for instance, I guess while I was working on the severity score that you saw, we had all that information gathered in our system, so it was super easy. I didn't have to go anywhere to go out and get that data. But for the journaling aspect of our product, I needed to spend time making sure that we had a labeled data set that was specific to our problem. There's a ton of data sets out there that you can use on Sentiment or that use like social media and whatnot, but or different corpuses, but we needed it specifically for our problem of understanding patient, suicidal, self-harm kind of emotions. And so setting expectations is key. I know it's tough though to estimate. One of the things that kind of helps me is I think about it in 3 ways, right? I think about how long I'd like it to take given the rest of my workload, how long I actually think it's going to take given what we know, the complexity, the setup, the infrastructure, the data that we have, so on and so forth. And then how long I think it's going to actually take given meetings, given these ad hoc things that always come up. And from there, I'm usually able to give a pretty clear estimate and also end result of what it's going to be. But as long as you communicate openly and often, and you're kind of transparent and you're setting these expectations, you're going to be in a much better place to succeed, because they'll know not to expect a finished product. They might have an iteration of it that you need to discuss and kind of suss out a little more. And when it finally, I guess, comes to actually doing it, for instance, one of the things, it's kind of my template, I guess. If it's for product or if it's for customer success, I always open up with a whiteboarding session. We have a brainstorm where we define the problem we want to solve, we figure out the business value, we design those KPIs, and we identify the challenges. Some of the challenges, for instance, might be about business definitions, or the definitions, they might be kind of vague. So you need to iron out and make sure you have a single source of truth on that, or else you might run into problems later on. And then also, there could be challenges with data. The data might not be there yet. It might need to be added, or there might be some bugs in the data, and it's like, I can get you a bunch of data, but there's going to be 2 weeks missing when we push something that shouldn't have been pushed and there's a bug in it. So it's kind of at this point understanding where we're at, what the problem is that you're going to eventually dive into. And then usually that's where I go off and I start gathering the data, understanding it, and exploring it. The key here, though, is to iterate often. Fail fast and fail often is what they say, but that's kind of what I do. I visualize, I inspect, I iterate, and then rinse and repeat. And that's kind of the key to success for me is at this point, because it helps me stay efficient. It helps me keep that line of communication open, and then it also helps me not fall into a rabbit hole, which is super fun. I love doing it, and it ends up not really being so great on the bottom line. So that's why keeping things in this cadence of communication quick, it allows you to kind of rein that in. And then finally, say I go in and I gather the data, I understand, and I'm back. I'm ready to talk with the stakeholder. It doesn't, what I bring back doesn't have to be beautiful. Actually, no, it does have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be like complex, I guess. It might just be a simple Python graph, or Matplotlib graph, or I might run my stakeholder through a IPython notebook. Depending on what the problem is, I might spin up like a web app, but it is really all dependent on how easily I can communicate my results. From there, I might go back, like I said, rinse and repeat, or make a decision. Can we go forward? And from there, I bring it out of R&D to first engineering to kind of make sure we can productize it, to sync up on what it's going to look like for a data product. If I'm speaking with customer success, it might be just putting it on a dashboard or something like that. But for product, I'm bringing it to engineering to kind of sync up, and then design to make it beautiful. I think all my colors and stuff and themes look great, but then I bring it to design and they're like, no, this has got to go. We gotta redo all of this. And then third, I bring it to marketing and customer success, where they can kind of focus in on the message that we're going to deliver externally as well as internally, how we're going to teach our users, and then how we're going to actually get feedback as early as possible. So that's kind of key to the whole data-driven project is kind of the end part, making sure it's a collaborative effort because having those people involved in having a data-centric stakeholder and a solid data culture where people kind of get what you're talking about is obviously, it makes things easier when you're trying to build a data-driven project. But where to start? How do you do that? For us, and I think for everybody, my top priority is just to make sure I document everything. It's going to be the key business definitions. It's going to be table structures and unclear column names and whatnot, because I want to be aligned so that I don't get sales, for instance, coming to me and saying like, this number looks wrong, and it's because they're going by a different definition. And so what happens, like you end up spending time talking about the filters you applied under the data source that you got and not actually really answering the question. So the sooner you can provide a place for a single source of truth for those things, the easier your life will be, and also the kind of more data driven and data centric your company's going to be. That being said, I know it's not easy or fun to document, but you just got to start somewhere, and then it'll grow over time. Do it at your own pace, but just start. It's going to eventually grow out, and then once it starts growing out, and you have a team, you can incorporate it into a nice handbook where you outline your how-tos, you outline your processes, your style guides. Might be a place for the analytics tracking, and then you can also have a spot for how people can find you. When they have a data question, you can give them a place to find all the answers, because you don't want that scenario to happen where you're in a company where only a few people know where the data lives, right? So you want to be able to provide that documentation so that the data, if the documentation is there, it lives there, they're going to find it, so they can start finding these answers on their own. Number 2 is to make noise. So that's it's key. You gotta make yourself easy for people to find, and then hard for people to ignore. For us, we have a Slack data channel where I'll throw in my thoughts. I'll throw in blog posts. People will ask me questions. Before we might turn it into a ticket, it'll be like that open forum, that open discussion place. And then every couple weeks, I have a data science roundup where I'll go over all the cool things, make sure that the visibility is there on what we're doing, and so it doesn't get lost in all the the shuffle, because making sure you're present in the organization, it helps you be more efficient, but in the long run, but it also will help them understand how you're thinking and start to understand how to think about data. One of the things that has helped me, as I kind of said before, is connecting with your stakeholder. So going out and building rapport. For my company, that's like everybody. Like I talk with everybody. It might not be like that in the near future, where you'll be focused on certain stakeholders. You might not be able to get everybody's name and kind of get everybody's deep understanding on how they think. But when you can, you should, because it helps you understand their problem and how they think about what the metrics, what number might be important to them, or what they're actually thinking about. The next time around, it just gets easier and easier. And then one of the final things that has helped me make noise and kind of be present in the organization is to do some user acceptance testing with their developers on data components. So it's tough because building for an application is way different than building for data. So they don't necessarily know the data consideration. So you have to be that fly in the ear, make sure that they know how the company's going to be using the data, how I'm using data, just to make sure they kind of, I drill it in until they get it right. And then 3, embracing a yes mentality. So that's a key value we have at NorFlow, and it definitely trickles down specifically to the data science. What we do is tough, and there isn't always a clear answer, but there is always an answer. You just have to dig deeper and have that grit, kind of keep going and persevere. You have to ask the right questions. But I guess also, let me clarify, you don't want to say yes to everything, though. You're gonna regret it. It'll start trickling down. You'll end up spreading yourself too thin, right? And you'll lose that time management skill. You'll lose that kind of in-depth understanding of the questions and things that they're coming to you for. I guess at a certain point in time, it is good to kind of jumpstart, but you're going to grow, and that's going to set an awful precedent, because you're not going to be able to do that as you grow. You're not going to be able to say yes to everything. And so that goes with my next point. Teach people to fish. So they're never going to learn to do it themselves if you keep doing it for them. So one of the biggest challenges I find is that it's not hard for me to create the analysis or the dashboard or the report. It's kind of getting them to learn about it and kind of spend time actually understanding it. Most people at NorFlow and your companies want answers from data, and most people at NorFlow and your companies, they're capable of finding the answers from the data given the right tool. So you kind of have to just connect the two. One of the things that I've been doing, depending on your company scale, you'll find mixed results, I guess. Your mileage may vary, but I've taught others basic SQL, those that are kind of the data-centric people that could use that connection. I teach them basically basic SQL commands, how our database works, and the key relationships that they may work with and need to know, and how to find basically their own answers in the business intelligence tool when our drag and drop GUI doesn't do enough. I mean, I still get complicated queries. They don't do those, but they're off and running, pulling from data more and more each day, and it's great because it's like, instead of them coming and saying, "Hey Bill, do this for me," it's, "Hey Bill, I've done this. Can you review it?" So it's that last mile that I get now, and I'll take that all day, every day. It helps that problem where you feel like most people will come to you like they're at a cafeteria and they're waiting for this data food that you're dishing out. It's just one long line of people wanting answers. So when you can teach people to fish, it helps kind of break down that line, and they can do things on their own. And one of the last few steps here, I guess, is relying on your roadmap, making sure you are setting expectations and you're transparent about it and open about it, because it's key to not only a successful career or organizational development, but it's key to burnout. You're going to be pulled in 1,000 different ways, and you need to be able to balance those short-term continual projects with the long-term projects. And then also you want to obviously centralize your data as soon as possible. In my opinion, the earlier you do it, the more questions you'll be able to answer, the more relationships you'll be able to explore, and the picture of things such as, user journeys will just be more complete, and you'll be able to get those insights more quickly. And finally, communicate openly and often. So this also allows for organizational alignment. It allows for your transparency and accountability. Because it establishes a cadence. And so when it establishes a cadence, it allows you to kind of make sure you're working on the things that end up mattering the most. And to kind of wrap it all back together, the overall goal for me of building a data-driven culture is to be able to drive change. It's requiring empowering others to have a discussion about their data. It's about spreading data throughout an organization so they can kind of start to answer the questions themselves. And it's about having a well-aligned organizational core that goes beyond like the AI, like data science buzzy checkbox that they're doing. It's actually having a clear vision on what that data-driven future holds, and with everybody in the organization, top to bottom, working together to achieve it. And it is also to make sure you are flexible, I guess, in the long term and specific in the short term. So you got to rely on your roadmap for that, and making sure you're adaptable and flexible. And I know like there's I'm sure a ton of other bullets that we could add to here, and there's not I haven't covered everything, but I hope you guys learned something in here that can help you succeed in your career. So thanks. Any questions?
Yeah. There's two questions. So it's more about the app than the first half and the second half. So a patient signs up for the app, right? How do you get the rest of their data, like their step count, their sleep, their comorbidities, let's say lab values? Where does that come from?
Yeah. So how do we start building that trove of data that we have on the patients? It's kind of that intersection between data and product. Really, we ask. Well, yeah, we have them sign up, and through the mobile app process, you ask for the ability to get into the health data, for instance, or if they don't, we also send in push notifications at different moments, or like we gamify things so they can get incentives to stay and to keep building these streaks that will allow them to get through these strategic funnels that allow for those successful outcomes. So it's a lot of it is built into the product. We hook up with EHRs as well, so we can get information passed from there. But for us, it's about initially when they get on board and they sign up from their providers. Their provider has information on them already, but then we ask them for other information, as it goes along. And within a nice mobile app kind of experience.
All right. And then so following up from that, so you talk about your severity model. So how do you test your severity model accuracy? Or you want to say this patient is at a risk for suicide. So in theory, you had to have patients who quote unquote successfully committed suicide in order to have that data. So where are you pulling that data from as well?
It's not successfully completing suicide. It is having suicidal ideation. So that's slightly different. There is a part of a clinically validated assessment that is given for depression and anxiety, and you can start to understand through through a few of the questions, but one of them asks about suicidal ideation. And so from there, we know that they had this or didn't have it, for instance. And then also we have our a kind of set of experts to kind of come in and help build this model with us. So we know that this is what they care about. They want to work towards putting into this one piece, so they don't have to think about it as much. They just know off the bat they can come into a monthly review and have that, and then we test it with them. We make sure that these behavioral health specialists and other experts are on board and it's in the right direction.
When you were coming up with the severity model, I guess you had text, you had to annotate it.
Mm-hmm.
As you were doing that, was that something where you would train people to do it, or did you rely solely on the behavioral health guys?
Yeah, we relied on the experts to do it. You could, yeah, we were thinking of the different ways, like turking it out and just having like a bunch of people do it. But yeah, we work with a lot of sensitive data, and so you can't have that. And so whenever possible, we have different connections, different our network set up, and we kind of lean on them to help us out and help give those scores or give their evaluations.
Okay. Did you write your own tooling for that, or?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. They can all go in and kind of start annotating it, on their own. They don't have to be in office or whatever. So it was nice. It made it much quicker for sure. Yes.
So I understand that as part of working with mental health data, you have both legal and sort of occupational obligations that are above and beyond the standard HIPAA requirements. I know that, like for example, release of different mental health care information is subject to even tighter requirements than necessarily a basic HIPAA request. And I'm also interested to know, given that you are rating the severity of self-harm thoughts, how do you handle discriminating between data that is subject to the basic HIPAA requirements versus something that is more sensitive, or discriminating between categories such as indefinite self-harm thoughts and definite plans of self-harm that cross into that area of a duty to notify? How do you handle those extra levels of sensitivity in your work, and what are the challenges again?
Yeah, we're actually kind of getting more involved with that now. We're not diagnosing for that's right off the bat. We're making sure we're giving them, and we're suggestions essentially that this may be a journal that has self-harm in it. One of the challenges that we have is, unfortunately, providers sometimes don't want to know that stuff, to be honest. It creates a liability for them, and it's kind of, I don't know, it is what it is, but it's one of the ways that we do that we kind of bake in extra security, and we make sure if they want to see it, they can. If they don't have to. If the patient wants to share the information, they can. If the patient doesn't, they don't have to. It's actually interesting because you get two sides of the spectrum. You get one set of patients that are all about writing in journals and wanting their providers to see what they have, and kind of getting that feedback from them. If they're not getting feedback from the provider, they don't think it's important. And then on the other side of it, they want it to be a journal that's in their home in a drawer. They don't want their provider to know about it. So we kind of have to, again, understand the users and kind of what they want and what they don't want, and try to break down the barrier and tell them that this is will be overall useful to them.
Somewhat related to the previous question, one of your points was about iterating often.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that in such a heavily regulated environment such as healthcare?
How do we iterate? Oh, well, actually, I guess one of the things that helps is we don't have to go through FDA regulations. We're a decision support tool, so as a designation, so we don't have to wait for somebody to make the call that we're allowed to keep iterating. One of the reasons why we didn't want to go down that route is because it's so narrow. It takes a really long time to get things done, and we wanted to be able to kind of fly like a startup that needs to be able to change as your business changes. We didn't want to be pivoting or making fundamental business changes if we couldn't have that team to and have that flexibility to iterate. So we don't actually have to really slow down for FDA or those guidelines. Any others? All right, cool. Thanks, guys.